All right. Does that work? Does everybody see that?
Yes, works perfect. Thanks, Ingo. You have 10 minutes.
Okay. So, to get straight to it, generative AI in elections, I'm going to give a quick overview of what the state of play is at the moment, what the technology can do, what it cannot do, what the impact has been of on misinformation, and some mitigation strategy. It's a lot, so I have to race through a little bit, but I'll try to make it in the 10 minutes. So 2025, AI misinformation has definitely arrived. We've been seeing it in election processes and election campaigns throughout the world, but it's not quite as terrible as we feared when the technology rose first in 23 with ChatGPT. Quick overview, what is it we are seeing? We are seeing a lot of audio deepfakes. I'll get to that in a second. We also see some video deepfakes, both made with AI, but mostly avatar style. We also see AI used not for misinformation itself, but more like for ironic and for political memes. So not all AI used in politics is nefarious. For example, in India, there are quite a few very entertaining meme moments that have been made with AI. But more than anything, we still see a lot of cheap non-AI fakes, cheap fakes, because they're simply good enough for misinformation actors to spread their messaging, and we'll get there. What hasn't happened yet is the worst case scenarios that we saw when image generation and video generation first came up, that we would be completely inundated by full scene fake video material depicting stuff that hasn't happened, and we would lose a sense of what is real and what is not. The death of reality that hasn't happened yet, and that has to do both with limitations of the technology and cost, and also because cheap fakes are still good enough. And I'll cover that briefly. We also haven't seen autonomous super persuasion bots. There was a fear that language models would just go out on the internet and individually try to convince voters to change their political opinions through interaction, like agentic, self-controlled behavior. We haven't seen that either, again, because the technology is not good enough yet to actually do that. So let's panic, but let's panic responsibly. Quickly covering the techniques we've seen. AI generated audio clips, that's what's already near perfect today. So that is what we've been seeing mostly deployed in misinformation. There are quite a few important ones. Last year, there was the fairly well-known Biden robocalls with a fake message of then President Biden. There was a fairly famous one in Slovakia where a candidate was faked having said in an audio that beer prices would rise drastically if he was elected, which actually might have cost him quite a few points at the polls. So sounds entertaining, but it's not. There is actually real impact of these audio fakes on in political processes. The thing is that is like that because it's very, very simple to do. If we had more time, I could actually demonstrate that to you in real time during a workshop. But basically, with 10 seconds of audio from a target, so that could be a WhatsApp message the person sends you, or you just grab something, some voice from their social media, you can create a cloned version of that voice with a platform. There are several ones. I've been using 11 Labs for my testing. It's just $5 a month. You just create the voice. And once you have this synthetic voice, you can just let that voice speak any text you type. So it's very simple to do that, even without the person, the target, knowing. And then you can circulate those through, instant messenger platforms, and that really spreads really quickly. So that's what we've mostly been seeing. We've also seen a lot of AI-generated images. They are visually better than ever. They're improving steadily, so you're not going to likely see like hands with 6 fingers and things like that. but they do have still some limitations of the technique. And also, the persuasion power of fake images has been fairly limited. Technically, you see here, this is an example of the evolution of the quality from the early Mid-Journey, which is one of the well-known models that is being used for image generation, the version 1 from 22, 5.1. This is, I think, May 23, actually. So they are now visually indistinguishable from actual photos. And they've been deployed in a lot of election contexts, but control is still difficult. If you actually work with these tools and try to create these images, you'll see that it's sometimes very difficult to make them understand what exactly you want and give you those results. Videos, likewise, are visually very impressive, but you see the same problem as with images. If you want a model to create exactly what you want, you'll see it can be very frustrating because the model doesn't actually understand your prompt like a human would. So getting precise output is tricky. What you see online often are beautifully looking examples, but many of them are cherry-picked. So there's people generating many hundreds of clips and then just pick a few that look nice and put them together. So it's more like, let's see what the model gives me, and then we can generate a narrative around it that looks good. But if you're trying to create a specific piece of misinformation with those models, that is actually not easy. That is why what we've mostly seen on video fakes is what's called AI avatars. These are the simplest to make. You basically just have a photo of a person, frontal, side, and usually their voice cloned, and then you can animate that photo, letting them say whatever you want them to say. And together with the animated avatar video, it's fairly high impact. There was an example just in May 26 in Buenos Aires, where I'm residing, where just one day before the elections, bloggers associated with the incumbent party launched two deepfakes of that avatar style, where a candidate and the political leader of that candidate both supposedly claimed that they are stepping down. I mean that they're not gonna participate, and inviting people who were going to vote for them to vote for another candidate instead. These were fakes, and the people affected actually came out really quickly saying, hey, wait, I didn't say this, this is false. But it was very shortly before the election, and in the election result, there was actually a rather unexpected swing that could very easily have been the result of this intervention. So they're happening and they're having an impact. I'm going to skip how to do these because we don't have enough time, but you're likely to see more of those. Shallow fakes are still the most deployed technique, where basically you just take organic video, real photo from somewhere, and you just put fake labels on them, put them out of context, or stick a reputable media outlet image on there. Those are the ones you see a lot more still than actually sophisticated deepfakes. One unexpected flip side of this whole of the AI hype of like these models can do anything, they're super powerful, everything will change, is something called the liar's dividend. Now, liar's dividend is a collateral effect of the media coverage of AI capabilities. So if we say everything can be made with AI, then bad actors can actually use something that's called the deepfake defense, which is say they're just denying the veracity of authentic media. So if I've been caught taking a bribe somewhere and that's being filmed and then this is being deployed, then my defense is, oh no, this is AI, this is my political enemies who are spreading this is not real. And then you get into proving or disproving whether a piece of media is authentic, which is quite difficult, which has a very concerning long-term impacts on things like investigative journalism or evidence in legal cases. Is a whole workshop apart diving into that. And finally, we also have AI-enabled phishing and bullying. So AI tools that try to email customized phishing emails to election officials, for example, to try to get access to credentials, and also deep fakes of election officials themselves that are being deployed for harassment and for slandering. So we've seen that as well. What hasn't happened yet is models effectively impersonating real humans online, on comment forums, on forums, robocalls with synthetic audio for interactive persuasion. These are all still science fiction, and hopefully will stay that. At the moment, this is not happening, and it's not clear that it will ever happen, but these fears haven't yet happened. So let's hope it stays that way. Now, what can we do about all this? Mitigation strategies. There are basically two approaches. So we can either try to detect whether a piece of media was made with AI, or we can try to prove that an organic piece of media was actually really filmed by pointing a camera or a microphone on a real event in physical space. AI detection, they're tools. You might have seen them. You just upload a piece of media to a scanner website or a local tool, and they try to find patterns that give away their synthetic or AI origins, or they try to read watermarks that are embedded in the media. They do give you a result. The only problem is it's never certain. You get some % of confidence that something was made with AI or not. It's hard to distinguish between legitimate modifications that also can be made using AI tools like touching up lighting or things like that. And also, the better the models get that generate the AI media, the better the detectors have to get. So it's kind of like the race between virus and antivirus software. It's always one is ahead. So these are help, but they're not foolproof. Digital provenance is the other way around. So we're trying to prove that a piece of media is actually authentic. So the way we do that is when we take a photo, for example, or we film a video, just right at that moment when the media is generated, we add a digital signature to the media that protects both the media file and the metadata from being modified. You will see if they are modified because it will break the encryption. So then if you get a piece of media like that and it has my signature on it, then the idea is that you can trust that at least it has left my hands and hasn't been modified since, because the signature is intact. There are different standards. One is the C2PA. It's an emerging industry standard that comes out of Adobe, so it's corporate. But there's also a proof mode out of the human rights violations NGO scene, and witness from the same area. So there's different standards that are vying for being implemented. This is an example of a photo I took on a mission in Venezuela. So I used a specific app on a phone to take this picture, and then the place where the picture was taken, the date when it was taken, and the integrity of the picture itself is protected by that signature. Great idea in principle. However, we did find trying to use it in the field that it has some drawbacks as well. The apps on the phones are quite slow still because they have to do a lot more stuff in the background with all the signing and all the cryptography than the native technology that your phone uses. And also people are used to just taking pictures with their regular phone software. So getting them to actually under pressure use a specific app to take a specific credential photo is actually quite a challenge. Then if you want to share the photo, you upload it to social media or to your website. The credentials break quite easily. They get stripped when the photos are re-encoded. So it's actually quite hard to get a credentialed photo to your audience. It's still not really solved to sign them with your own institutional signature. And they still can get forged. So they're not foolproof against forgery. So nice approach, promising, still developing technology. And I think I made it, well, I'm a little bit over, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingo. I think we learned a lot, especially zooming into what the technology is showing us. And I think already you have requests in the chat for your presentation. I think I liked that you try to panic us less. So it's good to know that we're not in doomsday yet, but we could be there. I'm going to ask, first welcome Aaron, and ask Aaron to maybe zoom out a little and tell us where things stand in the big picture. I'd ask Osama to put Aaron's bio. Aaron is with us, joining very early from Canada. We're very grateful to have you. He's with the Center in Governance in Canada. He is a leading expert. He's often being asked to speak to governments, to organizations, and he's an authority with us today on this topic. And we're very happy, Aaron, that you gave us time. I know your time is very busy, but we'll ask you to please share your expertise, because really this is a public good. What you know, what you understand, and the work that you're doing to defend our sort of public spaces of information for information integrity is so critical to the work that we do. And so we're very happy that you're doing the work and also taking the time to share that with all of us. You have
Yeah,
10 minutes.
I'm more than happy to do it, and it's a pleasure to be with my colleagues again. And so, as you'd said, what I think I could do helpfully is zoom out a little bit and talk about what the relationship is between democracy, emerging technology, and human rights, because we often skip over parts of this conversation. So let me zoom out a little bit and talk first about what democracy actually is. And it's actually two things. Democracy is both a process on the one hand and an outcome on the other hand. So when I say a process, what do I mean? Well, that's actually the mechanics of democracy. So this is the right of citizens to vote in free and fair elections. It's the right to stand for office. You can participate in civic discourse. You can hold those with power to account. That is grounded in procedural integrity. So someone votes, you tally up the votes, and in some fashion, someone wins, but it's a transparent process. So that is the process. It's also an outcome. And so that is the rule of law, it is pluralism, it's human dignity, and it's respect for human rights. So in a healthy democracy, people not only vote, but they can do so meaningfully, right? So institutions not only govern, but they can do so responsibly and with the informed consent of the governed. So what are we talking about? Well, both of these are now under strain. So both the process part, right, and the outcome part are under strain. And at the heart of this strain, it is my contention to you today, the growing problem of disinformation is at the core of this. And that's this false or misleading content that's spread to deliberately deceive and manipulate people. So let me be clear here, right? We talk about disinformation an awful lot. It's not just a nuisance. It's not simply a matter of bad actors behaving badly. It is my view that disinformation is a direct assault on the foundations of democratic life and to the human rights that sustain it. So now we've talked a little bit about what democracy is. Let me talk about why human rights and democracy are intertwined and why it matters. So when we talk about human rights and democracy, let's talk about the human rights that are directly implicated in the practice of democracy. So, and I'm an international lawyer, so I'm going to start citing articles of different conventions and things like that. But just bear with me for a moment here. So Article 25 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, it guarantees every citizen the opportunity to vote, to stand for office, and to participate in public affairs. So this is not a privilege or a nicety. It is a fundamental right. Democracy cannot exist without it. We also have freedom of expression, and that's protected by Article 19 of the ICCPR. So that ensures that people can seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds without interference. So this idea, this right underpins this idea of open political debate, investigative journalism, and civic advocacy. We also have the freedom of thought and the freedom of opinion. So a right, this is so foundational that it's considered an absolute, what they call non-derogable right under international law. So no one can be forced to hold a particular belief or be prevented from forming their own views. We also have the right of non-discrimination and equality that ensures all persons can participate equally in the democratic process, regardless of race, gender, religion, or other status. So this idea protects that universal suffrage and equal access to power. We also have a right to access information. This is spelled out in treaties, but basically, this is important for democratic accountability. Without information, people can't scrutinize government or make informed decisions about the future. Now, I've talked about these rights as though they're separate, but they absolutely work together. So these create the conditions in which democratic participation is not only possible, but it's meaningful, it's inclusive, and it's just. So now we've talked about what democracy is, and we've talked about the human rights that are fundamentally implicated in that democratic process. So maybe let's talk for a moment about how disinformation actually undermines those rights. So the right to take part in government. Disinformation attacks this at its very root. So we've seen this in recent years. We've seen coordinated campaigns aimed at suppressing voter turnout, spreading false information about when and or where to vote, casting doubt on the legitimacy of the entire electoral system. And so what's the result of that? Well, people are disenfranchised and look, maybe not formally disenfranchised, but perhaps functionally disenfranchised. They are misled into silence, into abstention, and indeed into apathy. There's also, I talked about the freedom of expression. So paradoxically, this is interesting. So disinformation thrives in open societies where free speech is protected. But the intention is not to contribute to the public discourse. It is actually to distort and degrade and undermine it. So in many cases, malicious actors use false content to drown out legitimate voices, to intimidate their critics, or indeed to discredit the very truth itself. So when facts become optional, the value of expression declines, people retreat, dialogue diminishes, democracy suffers. I talked a little bit about the freedom of thought and opinion. And it's my view, this is actually perhaps where the most insidious harm is done. Disinformation campaigns are designed to manipulate what people believe, not through debate, which is fine, but through deceit, which is not fine. They exploit psychological biases, emotional triggers, algorithmic amplification to shape an opinion covertly. So in doing so, they intrude upon this sacred space of individual belief and decision making. And as I said earlier, this is a violation of that most fundamental of rights, this ability to think freely. And we have to call it when we see it. Non-discrimination and equality. Discrimination is often weaponized to exacerbate existing social divisions. Marginalized communities are frequently targeted with falsehoods, hate speech, tailored misinformation that's meant to divide and exclude. And so these campaigns are designed to reinforce systemic inequalities and erode the universal nature of democratic participation. I talked about the right to access information. So I'd say finally, disinformation disrupts the free flow of accurate and credible information. So when search results, social feeds, and recommendation engines are filled with falsehoods, especially when they're driven by, let's call them opaque algorithms, if I'm putting it charitably, it becomes nearly impossible for people to make informed choices about public life. So, in short, if you can remember one thing about this entire discussion that we're having, disinformation is not just a policy challenge, it's actually a human rights crisis. And so now let's pour some gas on this fire and talk about the accelerant. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. So the rise of generative artificial intelligence has dramatically intensified these problems. So, I mean, I'm not telling anyone something you don't already know, but let me just make a point here to say AI enables the mass production of realistic deepfakes, synthetic audio, and hyper-personalized messaging. It can automate the creation of fake news sites, simulate public support, and allow for micro-targeting of individuals based on intimate psychological profiles. So these tools can also be used to identify those social fault lines that I was talking about, whether they're cultural, racial, political, and to exploit them with damning precision. So what was once an intensive job to do this type of research and develop these products, you can now effectively develop a propaganda campaign that's scalable and data-driven with the click of a button. So this is not hypothetical. It is happening right now. It's happening everywhere, from election interference in liberal democracies to cross-border influence operations that blur the line between domestic debate and foreign manipulation. So what can we do? What can actually be done? Because I don't want to leave you just with a negative. So we can strengthen our media and information literacy. We have to equip people with the skills to navigate the modern information environment. So think about school curricula, public education campaigns, and really just fostering critical thinking, right? Literacy is always going to be the first line of defense. Regulating AI and online platforms. I know a lot of the times these platforms will talk about self-regulation. I'm sorry, voluntary codes are not enough. Rights-based governance is absolutely essential. We have to promote responsible information. So AI doesn't have to be just about harm. It can be a tool for good. We just need to invest in public interest technology and create incentives for ethical design. We're going to have to advance and why I'm glad to be speaking with this group. We have to advance international norms and cooperation. So disinformation is a global problem. It requires a global response. We need new international frameworks to protect the integrity of the information ecosystem, to uphold the right to truth, and to regulate cross-border manipulation. So let me close with this. Democracy is not self-executing. It does not run on autopilot. It must be renewed with every generation. This must happen through participation, vigilance, and above all, a commitment to truth. Disinformation and unchecked AI threaten to strip democracy of its moral clarity and its credibility. They obscure the truth, they suppress the will of the people, and they violate the rights that make participation meaningful. But we are not powerless. We have the tools, we have the frameworks, we have the human rights architecture to guide us. What we need now is the political will and the moral courage to act. Let's reaffirm our commitment to democracy, not as some kind of nostalgic ideal, but as a living promise that every person, informed and empowered, can shape their own future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for that last action to call, which is for us to be quite active in how we understand and respond to this. And I think you were a bit more doomsday than Ingo, but I think you have the bigger picture and you see the challenges and also the difficulty of reining this technology in. And so for that, we appreciate your expertise. Participants, feel free to ask questions in the chat box, and again, introduce yourselves. We're going to go to a third speaker, but we will have an opportunity to have a discussion with our speakers, but I want to save time, so we'll go to our third speaker, Renben Lee Dixon. She joins us from the Center for AI Policy, and Renben will speak to us about how this space is being regulated internationally. So are there frameworks? Are there treaties? Are there countries with regulations? And what do we know and what can we understand? Especially for those of us who work with our national partners, with our member states as the UN, and with our partners from other organizations. So Renben, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Nadia, for the introduction and also for the opportunity to share our work at the Center for AI and Digital Policy. Let me just get my presentation up real quick here. Right. All right. And also continue to share. I just want to share, thank Aaron for actually setting the stage on democracy and fundamental rights, because these are topics I'll be covering quite a bit in my presentation as well. So to start, I'll share an introduction of the Center for AI and Digital Policy and the AI and Democratic Value Report. Next, I'll walk through the CADIP Index and conclude with our key policy recommendations. Sorry, here we go. So the Center for AI and Digital Policy is a global independent nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. And it's through education and research Our mission is to ensure that AI and digital policy promotes a better society that is more fair, more just, and more accountable. We want to ensure a world where technology continues to advance our fundamental rights, democratic institutions, and the rule of law. We also provide expert guidance to governments and international organizations on AI policy developments, such as organizations including UNESCO, OECD, Council of Europe, G7, G20, and the European Parliament. Now, one of the key work at the center is in publishing the Artificial Intelligence and Democratic Values Report. The AIDV report is one of the most comprehensive review of AI policies and practices worldwide. So briefly about the report, it was first published in 2021, covering 30 countries, produced by 23 contributors. And this year we published our 5th edition assessing 80 countries. Our research team consisted of over 1,000 researchers representing more than 100 countries. The report itself spanned over 1,500 pages with more than 7,000 footnotes. Now, the key finding in this report is the CADIP index, which is an evaluation of countries' alignment with democratic values using 12 metrics. So these are the 12 metrics, and I'm going to briefly introduce each one of them because apart from being used as a benchmark to assess alignment with democratic values, they are also a valuable framework for governments, for decision makers, leaders to build AI governance. So the first two are the endorsement and implementation of OECD G20 AI principles. So these are the first global frameworks for AI governance, and it is currently endorsed by all of its members, but it is also open to non-members. So countries outside of the OECD and G20 are also able to endorse and implement these principles. Next are the endorsement and implementation of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So this is perhaps one of the most widely recognized and widely adopted legal framework on human rights. And human rights predates the rise of AI, and it has been around for a long time. And so as anticipated, it is now the foundation to key policy discussions. We look to Freedom House assessment on how countries are protecting human rights and implementing these guardrails. So next is public participation in the development of AI policy and publicly available AI documents. So what this looks like is that we look for countries that have established meaningful public participation in the development of their AI policies. And what this looks like is there should be formal processes and all members of societies are adequately represented and that sufficient timing is provided to ensure that the engagement is meaningful. We also look for documents on AI policies and practices that are made publicly available, and they should be easily accessible. They should be complete, accurate, so up to date. Next is independent oversight. Now, because the deployment and development of AI raises concerns around issues such as accountability, privacy and data protection, fairness, transparency, and equity, it is important that independent agencies are established to monitor and mitigate these issues. So typically we look for data protection agencies, human rights commissions, and AI ethics commissions. So next are the principles of fairness, accountability, transparency, rule of law, and fundamental rights. Now, there are many themes and principles in the discussions of AI policy. We identify these 5 as significant key goals for countries to aim for. They're often found in AI policy framework and they are grounded in law. So typically we look for explicit mention and incorporation of these principles in national AI strategies or AI governance framework. Next one is algorithmic transparency. This is one of the most significant AI policy issues today. And what this means is that individuals should have the right to know when decisions have been made about them by AIs, and that there should also be mechanisms in place to enable them to review, to challenge, and seek redress on these decisions. Currently, countries that are covered by the EU GDPR or signatories of the Council of Europe Convention 108+ are required to provide these rights. So beyond that, we also look for countries that have enacted illegal frameworks that are also providing these rights. Next is the endorsement of the AI Treaty. So last year, the Council of Europe enacted the Convention on AI and Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law, which makes it the first legally binding international treaty on AI. And so recognizing its significance, we introduced this as a new addition in our 2025 AIDV report. Next is the implementation of the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI. This is also a very large ethical framework that has been endorsed by all UNESCO members, which is over 190 countries. So right now we're looking for completion of the implementation of this framework. So what that could look like is the completion of specially designed tools from UNESCO that are aimed to support these implementations. So for instance, the readiness assessment methodology and the ethical impact assessment toolkits. Both of these are incredible toolkits that can help governments and leaders to launch their AI governance implementation efforts. Last but not least is the endorsement of Global Privacy Assembly resolutions. So this is a conference of data protection and privacy commissioners, and they have adopted several resolutions that are specific for AI. So we have the AI ethics, accountability, facial recognition, and generative AIs. So typically we look at data protection agencies that have endorsed these resolutions because these are key indicators of their commitment to uphold these guardrails. So based on these CADIP index and the metrics that I just presented, we use them as a basis for our policy recommendation work, but they are just one part of it. The other part, we also refer to the Universal Guidelines for AI, which was introduced in 2018 at the Conference for Data and Privacy Commissioners. What it contains is essentially elements from human rights and data protection laws and ethical frameworks as well. So the goal of this is to ensure that we maintain transparency and accountability in AI, as well as to ensure that humans retain control over the technology. So based on the CADIP index and the Universal Guidelines for AI, we offer the following policy recommendations. So the first one is public participation. So as mentioned earlier, this is an important aspect when it comes to developing AI policy, not simply because that it reflects the democratic process, such as those we see in elections, but also this is essential for addressing the complexities of AI risks, as well as the value-driven issues associated with AI. Next are clear red lines or prohibitions. This is something that our Associate Director, Christabel Randolph, and our President, Mark Rotenberg, has written extensively about that there is a need to draw clear red lines on certain AI practices. So for instance, AI systems that violate human rights should be prohibited. And on top of that, the Universal Guideline for AI also prohibits secret profiling and unitary scoring. Next is implementation and enforcement. So last year in 2024, we saw governments and organizations moving from the proposal stage to enactment. So we want to build on this positive momentum and urge decision makers and leaders to start advancing their principles into implementation and enforcement. Human oversight and human in the loop remain essential element in the use of AI, especially in high-risk AI systems such as those used in hiring processes or decision support system in order to reduce serious AI harms. And on top of that, it is also essential to retain human in the loop to uphold the termination obligation that is outlined in a Universal Guideline for AI. Next is algorithmic transparency. As mentioned earlier, this is also very important to ensure that individuals have the right to know when decisions are being made about us, and that we are empowered to seek, review, and challenge these decisions. And last but not least is we need AI liability frameworks that can adequately address the harms associated with AI. Because as we know, AI is increasingly deployed across critical sectors. It is affecting how we live, how we work, and how we interact. And so it is important to have liability frameworks that can address harms both before and after deployment of AI. So for instance, not only does it provide clear liability for developers, for deployers, for users, A liability framework can also act as a strong incentive for deployers and developers to prioritize safe and responsible AI advancement. And so to conclude, I just want to reemphasize that the guardrails reflected in these recommendations are imperative to ensure that in the progress of AI, we can continue to advance our fundamental rights, our democratic values, and the rule of law. And these recommendations can be found in our 2025 AI DV report, which is available and free to download on our website. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renben. I think this is very valuable information for our speakers, situating where things stand globally and what countries can do. I have questions, but I'm going to go to our fourth speaker, but I also want to ask all of you to write your questions in the chat box. I will use that to moderate the discussion. We will not have time to allow everyone to ask questions directly, so we ask you to write it in the chat box and our speakers will respond right after our last speaker. I'm going to introduce him. He's AJ Patel. He's my colleague. He's an electoral expert with UNDP. He has done a lot of work in this field. He's the author of a new paper published with UNESCO on AI information integrity. And we asked AJ to tell us a little bit about what we can do about it as electoral practitioners, what our partners, EMBs, can do about it. So he's going to go a little bit into that side of the conversation. AJ, thank you so much for being here. You have 10 minutes. AJ, you are muted if you're speaking. You are connected.
I am unmuted now, I believe.
Yes, we hear you and see you. Welcome.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Ajit. So yeah, underpinning the UN approach to an information environment is a respect for the freedom of expression. And yeah, with the UN, views this as important throughout public life, but perhaps it's particularly important during elections. There is an understanding that it's not for the state, with some specific and well-defined exceptions to dictate what political speech should include. And this was, for example, a tenet that's been in place through the work that UNDP and UNESCO have been doing on AI and elections, both with the MOOC that I believe some of the people on this call had worked on, the massive online course, and the recent issue brief. However, in the digital age, the simple premise of that we need to have respect for freedom of expression does not mean simple practice, especially within the highly charged space of electoral competition, where people also deserve other rights, the right to freely participate and form opinions, as Aaron detailed. And electoral authorities have a role in supporting an even playing field within elections and sort of this information space, be it through campaign finance or media regulation, depending upon the mandates in their country. But they also hold a natural responsibility to sort of protect the processes that they are overseeing, with online assaults against their character, their personnel, and electoral events becoming increasingly common. And potentially reputationally lethal, and possibly also leading to physical harm. And no doubt, I recognize that the challenge of information pollution within elections has been long-standing. For about a decade, we have seen widespread public concern about online manipulation within elections. And before that, the more mundane fear of propaganda within elections has gone back as far as, there's been elections or as far as there's been politics. However, in a world increasingly littered with AI, some of the dynamics have deepened, while other basic assumptions are being turned on their heads. Voices that we see online are no longer just a refrain of humans. We have online machines that effectively speak and create and can be convincing to some degree. You have human editors that are being replaced by algorithms and systems that are built for capitalism. and influence is flowing towards those who sort of control or can best deploy AI within their sort of area of work. And within this, we have election management bodies who need to be able to navigate and thrive this environment, and continue to conduct their functions and conduct credible and inclusive participatory elections. And so looking at how they can do that, some of the dynamics are sort of the same as have existed for a long time. Some of the approaches such as working towards building public trust, operating transparently, communicating electoral information widely, are as important as they ever have been. There's also a renewed need for agility and professionalism within the parties in the space. EMBs need to know and process and respond what's happening in the information space, but need to be able to do so at a speed that sort of they previously haven't had to muster. I think we all understand that once a falsehood is taken hold, it becomes very, very hard to dislodge, and with the internet, those falsehoods spread fast. So strategic communications has been an area of particular interest as a way of sort of forming effective responses in a sort of a structured way. As we look at how EMBs can also benefit from these current trends, we also look at AI within their work. So, if you're going to create these responses, you need to understand what's happened. And looking through the UNDP website, you can see a number of examples of where UNDP has worked on different solutions. So there's the eMonitor Plus project, which has been provided to a number of EMBs to help them better understand the information environment. The UN has advisors in the field who work with electoral authorities to assist in how to use these technologies safely, how to deploy AI to create content, how to use it to reach out to voters, use different platforms. It's worked on creating different programming ideas, for example, through the Select project. And then we have the previously aforementioned massive open online course, the Freedom of Expression AI in Elections. And then, as Nigel talked about, this talk is sort of the beginning of what I understand to be like a longer debate or engagement with the community about what can be done with AI. But I think there's also an understanding that's become quite widespread that EMBs cannot protect the information environment on their own. The problem is too complex, and elections are not just there to protect. Elections are a common cause. So building communities and coalitions are vital if a country is going to be able to contend with the emerging range of AI threats and be able to reach all areas of society with whatever responses are deemed necessary. Also UNDP has, as I understand, an international action coalition that works on like trying to bring together different stakeholders to look at elections, and also works at country level to sort of replicate that approach. And here we're talking about sort of CSOs, academia, human rights defenders, and other arms of government. But also we're not forgetting the tech firms themselves. There are obviously, I think, different people have faced different challenges with them, but a relationship with the firms can be valuable, if not just to advocate to them to conduct their policies in the way that seem fitting in the environment, to remove particular pieces of content if required, which have been seen to, if there's a belief that they violate the policies in place, or to assist with like the discovery and breakdown of inauthentic influence networks, these sort of increasingly bot-powered organizations to influence public behavior. I think probably lastly, we should try not to forget that elections are fundamentally political processes, and political parties have already leapt on social media and are now already looking towards AI tools. And the nature of political competition is, it's quite fraught, and of course there are incentives to participating in this information, but there are also potentially incentives towards negotiation and bargaining. We've seen that like there's been some common cause found amongst in the last round of elections in 2024. We've seen some cause amongst different parties to agree on making deepfakes, especially those that are political or sexual in nature, unacceptable or illegal. Codes of conduct have found purchase in some cases with explicit agreements over how AI should or should not be used. Not always are these tasks that EMB should be spearheading, but there's certainly value for an EMB when these take place. And I think we've had 2 decades of social media, and we've seen a number of trends, innovations, and types of attacks that people had not predicted, especially not in the mid 20,000s. And in some ways, the social media innovations have been sort of quite incremental. But what we're facing now is a barrage of AI changes, which at first blush appear to be transformative. These may potentially herald like unprecedented upheavals across all parts of modern society. And it would be optimistic to think that we can totally understand or predict how AI is going to influence the information operation, information ecosystems for elections. And as such, I think there's an importance to look at how, as an electoral community, there's an ability to work together, as it's quite clear that elections will continue to be at the forefront of like both the use of AI for positive purposes, but also a space where the more malicious elements get deployed. Naj?
Thank you so much, AJ. You touched on a lot of implementable actions that our colleagues and our participants here can take. Thank you for that. I'm going to now, there's a lot of questions, so I'm going to take the last 30 minutes to give time to our speakers to reflect on the questions. We have questions that are quite technical, questions that are more general. But before that, I'd like the speakers to please share your contact information in the chat box. There's a lot of interest for our participants to connect directly with you. Please also, Renben and Ingo, share your presentations in the chat box. There's interest for that as well. Colleagues, please remain engaged with our speakers. This is the opportunity and why we want to build this community so that you have access to these expertise. Now, maybe I will go first question to Renben. There's a question on the frameworks, the treaties, the regulations that do exist globally. Now, most of the countries, as I see who are here, are not signatories to these instruments, but how can they be leveraged by electoral management bodies, even if they're not signatories as countries to these? How can they benefit from these guidelines and treaties? So Renben, that is for you.
Thank you. Sure. So first of all, I am browsing through the frameworks that I looked at. And because generally when we came up with this metrics, one of the key point is actually that it can be applied to as many countries as possible. So for instance, the OECD AI principles are not just limited for its own members, it is open for anyone to endorse and implement. And I also shared that the UNESCO recommendation has been endorsed by all of its members. I know it's probably not all countries in the world, but it is still over 190 countries. And also many of these frameworks are available to be endorsed and implemented. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the AI Treaty from the Council of Europe as well is open. So these are open framework, first of all. So if your organization or your government is interested, they are available and open. Now, the next point is, regardless of whether they are open or not, these frameworks can still be used as a framework, a starting point for governments, for leaders, for decision makers to use as a first approach, a framework to look at what are the key principles, what are the key mechanisms that needs to be in place to start developing AI governance, to start coming up with policies specific for elections, to start looking at these are the key points that need to be in place. So for instance, I would point to the UNESCO recommendation that I shared, because specifically I called out 2 tools that have been published by UNESCO to support this type of implementation, which is the readiness assessment methodology, which will help organizations and government to assess their capacity, whether or not they have the capacity, both in human capital, but also infrastructure, ready to actually deploy or adopt AI. And then there's also the ethical impact assessment tool can also help them look at whether or not, what kind of ethical impact these technology will have. So these are all very useful tools. I will share my presentation. And so I just want to underline and emphasize that even if your country has or has not endorsed these frameworks, they are still going to be a great starting point to look at.
Thanks so much, Ren. There are different types of questions, and some of them, I think one of them at least Ingo addressed in the comments, but maybe I'll go to Aaron. I think there's a bigger question that I also have, and it comes out here, is this information is very overwhelming. Like, where is the starting point? And where can institutions like electoral authorities who maybe have lost credibility, how do they regain that? And how do all of us start to begin to understand and actually be able to navigate this in an informed way? So maybe Aaron, I ask you to touch on that. Muted. Well, I can give the same question first to Ingo, because I think
Okay,
Ingo,
sorry, I
if-
couldn't
oh, there
unmute
you go.
myself. I'm in The Hague right now. The NATO summit's going on, and I'm in a hotel, and so my Wi-Fi cut out. Anyways, I had to rejoin. Here
Sorry
I am.
about that.
That is a really, really tough question. So, if I'm going to offer counsel on it, it's inevitably going to depend on who you are and what you do, and which country you're in. So, this is it's a big question, but the advice is going to be tailored, and it's going to be specific depending on the country and the actor in question. The general stuff I already said, right? Like, it really comes down to civic education. And the thing is, and I don't want to worry you all, but this is all set to get way, way, way worse. And so this disinformation stuff is going to get turbocharged as a consequence of generative AI. The only thing we can do, or one of the biggest things we can do, is protect ourselves through the skills, the transferable skills. So I was joking with someone the other day on April Fools. There was this article that went out that said, I was quite shocked to see it, but that the headquarters of the United Nations was actually moving to Toronto. And I thought, like, as a Canadian, as an international lawyer, I thought, this is amazing. It got me for like 5 seconds. But all that to say, the only because I was able to process the information through logic, reason, and reasoning, I realized that it was nonsense. But that's the point, right? And so the other thing is transparency, transparency, transparency. I think the U.S. election, in 2020, one of the biggest issues there was not that there was actual bias or that there was unfairness or that there was cheating. It was that there was the apprehension of bias or unfairness or cheating. So to the extent that you can dispose of those through transparency, I would. So if 2 pieces of advice at the general level, it would be education and transparency, but inevitably the true answer to your question is going to rest on the specifics.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I think this is why it's so important that we have you here and that all of us are connecting, because educating ourselves on this topic is really the primary step. And I know that many of the EMBs here also want to take the opportunity to do the same with their staff so that they're able to respond. So thanks, Aaron. I'm going to ask Ingo to maybe touch on a couple of the questions on the election observation, also on whether AI can be useful for vetting voter data, voter identities, diaspora voter registration. So those 2, Ingo, if you can address, and then I have another question from the audience to the rest of you. Ingo?
Yeah, okay. So I think one important thing, I already said that in the comments as well. uh, AI is very fashionable. Everybody wants to be seen using it because that's the topic du jour. Um, we have challenges, and AI may be helping us to address some of these, but let's not just run around with a hammer looking at everything as if it was nails and the hammer is AI. Like, if, um, particularly if the outcome of, like, data analysis, for example, if it's important that it's precise and that it really works well, uh, AI, specifically generative AI, because let's remember that's where we're talking. AI is a huge field, and not everything is ChatGPT. There's a machine learning, there's determinative AI. This is a topic that's been going on for like 50 years. So when we say AI as it's seen today, which is generative AI, is very good in something that's called style transfer, which is great for misinformation, for video fakes, for fun stuff, for text where it doesn't matter whether it's right or not. But if you need precision, you have to be very careful. Just a quick episode that illustrates that very well. I was asked a couple of months ago to score 25 applicants for a scholarship program. So they had, research papers and they had their CVs, and I was asked, oh, just give them scores, all the 25, so it helps us with the selection. And I was like, oh, great. I don't have a lot of time, but I'll just run them quickly through ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT to give me a draft of each of those, and then I'll just have to go in and check. Not something you should do, by the way, but if you only have a day, you say, well, let's do that. So I got a nice Excel file back with all the qualifications, and I checked, just make sure, if this is right. So I checked the first five, and it looked right. It seemed to coincide with what I'd been reading in some of the material. And then I checked number 6, and there was a candidate there. It's called Luisa Gonzalez. And I'm like, who is Luisa Gonzalez? I don't remember reading that. So I go back to my file of original candidates, and Luisa Gonzalez doesn't exist. She's not in there. But in my Excel from ChatGPT, I got beautiful research proposal, the CV, the grading, the scoring. It was wonderful. So I was like, what's going on? So I checked the other ones, and lo and behold, from 6 on until 25 were candidates that had nothing to do with the Excel I uploaded. They were plainly invented by ChatGPT. So thank God I didn't send that off. I would have looked really, really stupid. If you look around, lawyers drafting legal cases with the help of ChatGPT, inventing references that don't exist, etc., etc. This kind of stuff happens if you use LLMs, large language models, for stuff where correctness matters. So please don't do that. Like, let's not just try to throw them at everything that exists out there. They're good at some things, but not good at others. So, for example, voter registry databases, I would not run through an LLM. There are other techniques that are great for that. Talk to your IT people. Some determinative AI might be helpful. Old school machine learning, there's good stuff out there. But just upload it to ChatGPT and hope that magically the solution is going to arrive, which is what the model makers try to sell you to increase their valuations of their startups and their companies, is not a good idea. Sorry for the rant.
Thank you so much. No, I think this is quite important for all of us because we become so dependent on generative AI and that we take it as an authority when it gets information to us. So very good recommendation to us to always be careful. Thelma, we're not going to open the mics for questions because that takes a lot of time. We're going to still moderate through the chat box, the conversation. I have a question that sometimes we forget that AI and these new technologies also have a positive impact on our daily lives. I think all of us know it already. Maybe I'll ask AJ to touch on that. What are some of the positives that AI and the technologies around AI are bringing to the field of elections and participation? AJ?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's lots, right? So I think firstly, if we look at AI and we talk about the information ecosystem, we do, we have come to recognize that social media or the social media algorithms are AI and those are governing our spaces. Now, certainly on one hand, there are problems with that. We've all heard about the issues with echo chambers, etc. But they've also created the ability for sort of otherwise, smaller or marginalized voices to find purchase, which has at times um, created a space or greater political space or platform for groups who, under previous sort of structures of communication, would have had no entry point. I think we can also recognize that while there's certainly problems with the way that there are potential risks to the use of deepfakes or creation of deepfakes. The ability to cheaply create imagery also has benefits for different electoral stakeholders, including election management bodies. I was discussing with a colleague the other day who was talking about how an election management body he was working with now uses now uses Midjourney to create their public information materials. This is a lot cheaper than necessarily hiring a firm. You create it with AI, use AI to help you target it, to get it to the right people. There are definite positive workflows here. As Egon's talked about, there's different kinds of AI. So, the ability to start using machine learning, to start using data science can help election management bodies find deeper insights into the troves of data they probably collect and to better sort of fulfill their mandate. So, I think there's kind of like a lot, and we end up getting caught in this in the negatives, which of course are, unfortunately often quite negative. So it's understandable.
Thank you, AJ. Maybe that same question to you, Ingo, because you seem to be the most positive, I think, on the panel on where things are with AI, maybe mostly because it's not developed sufficiently, but maybe touch also on the positive and also on the question of how can election observation be improved with new technologies, and maybe also touch on the dangers of it. We didn't talk about a topic that is quite important with all of this, is the impact on women's political participation. Women are often already disadvantaged when it comes to the political and public space, but these new technologies are creating even further dangers for them and their safety online. So in your responses, if any of you also would like to touch on that, it would be important. Ingo?
Okay, maybe from the back forward, although that's not a positive, non-consensual AI pornography is actually something that's been a very big problem, both for slandering officials and in general for the female citizens and voters. That is a lot more widespread than which one would think. It's actually very hard to combat. So that's definitely something to be discussed, and mitigation measures and legal consequences for that as well definitely need to be scaled up worldwide. Improving election observation, one positive thing I've personally been experimenting with at the Carter Center as well is the digital provenance technology that I talked about briefly in the presentation. And that can also help election management bodies to give extra credibility to the materials that they put out. So beyond making sure that your websites are authentic, they're not being faked elsewhere, and that is something that particularly with government sites you can usually do pretty well. But if you put out material that is digitally signed with one of these provenance platforms, that can give an extra level of credibility, because if implemented correctly, it's not simple to impersonate or fake these signatures. So particularly, I mean, both for material that the election management body puts out, but also photos that election observers take in the field of polling stations, of results slips, what have you. You can use photo apps that add these digital signatures on the fly. Some of them are commercial, but not all of them. For example, Proof Mode, which is that app that comes out of the human rights violation space, is free of charge. You can download that online, and you can train your people to actually use that when they take photos. And that gives an extra level of authenticity to whatever you're trying to document. So this is a space that is worthwhile keeping in mind for us to use to give more weight to the audiovisual materials that we then share with our constituency. Again, other uses, like broadly speaking, I see. I would not advise election authorities to resort to AI, to Gen AI image generators to save a few dollars to generate materials, because I really think we will be inundated. We're already inundated with AI slop, like cheap AI generated imagery, where it doesn't really matter how well it looks or how exact it is, but it's being used to, flock products and just for cheap marketing on social media. So I think we as institutional stakeholders should actually hold back a little bit and say, okay, we have the funds, we have a public mandate to put out, proper media that we actually still take from actual people in the field. So let's not get ourselves on the same bandwagon as, cheap dollar stores on Facebook that are trying to sell you whatever with random AI generated slop imagery. I think it makes more sense for EMBs to put out professionally produced material, add signatures if you want to, and stay on that side of the quality versus slop divide.
Thank you so much. Maybe Ingo and AJ, there's a particular question about the AI or technologies and its ability to help with voter registration and identity verification. I don't know if you want to touch on it, but it's a question that's come a couple of times. And I know you are both quite technical on voter registration, so I throw that to you. Ingo and then AJ.
Again, I mean, if you were talking about specific models, maybe not Claude or ChatGPT, but models specifically designed to do that kind of work, that come with the right verifiers to make sure that the output is not whatever, sure. But then again, this is about contracting somebody who really knows how to work with large databases, how to look for these kind of solutions and implement them well. But what I think is people are looking for is trying to get around that, not having to work with these experts who actually know about the pitfalls and say, oh, let's just do this on the cheap, because if you just upload it to ChatGPT and ask the questions and I'll get the answer. Yes, you probably will get an answer, but whether that answer is correct or not, you'll have no form of knowing. So you really don't want to play with that with your voter roll. Like that is not something you just give to a general purpose LLM. Like make sure this is touched by somebody who knows what they're doing, whether with all the tools they might apply to that problem, they also use an LLM for some subtasks. Why not? But ChatGPT is not your answer.
Thank you. AJ?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd echo. I don't think it would really work if you put in ChatGPT, and then also you're taking your voter database and putting it into ChatGPT, and I'm not sure if anyone's going to appreciate that. Well, maybe ChatGPT, but probably not
Privacy, totally, yeah.
your data privacy, not your data regulator in country. But yeah, I mean, I think there are other AI or machine learning approaches that do make sense and require investigation. Could be applied, but yeah, you'd have to. It's not like an out-of-the-box solution, basically.
Thank you. I will go to Aaron. There's an interesting question. I think it comes up repeatedly, and we see it happening in electoral processes across the globe, is the impact of social media and how do we hold them accountable, the money spent on ads. So maybe, Aaron, I ask you, are there legal ways to pressure social media groups to help identify posts, to disclose the funding sources, how to hold social media platforms accountable, essentially, especially during moments of an electoral process where it's quite sensitive.
Yeah, it's a good question, and unfortunately, there's not really good ones. If there were, we would have done them already. A part of the problem too is we also have we're bringing old tools to a new fight, and by that I mean we tend to think of elections as something that happens and then stops happening, and so a lot of the times you'll see restrictions around political advertising within the 60 days before an election or 90 days before an election. Well, of course, disinformation campaigns and these campaigns are ongoing. Second point is the frailties of human psychology. We have old brains, right? We've got bias, and I don't mean like the bad bias. I mean just cognitive neural biases that help us get through our day. One is recency. We're biased toward things we hear last. Familiarity is a good one. I don't know if this has ever happened to anybody who's watching, but if you've heard a song on the radio that you didn't particularly like, and then a few months later you found yourself, sitting in your car, stopped at a light, singing that song, the only thing that changed is how many times you heard it. And so they know this. And our cognitive neural biases are being exploited. But the most insidious part of this is actually the business model itself. And so to your point, Nadia, it's not a bug, it's not a flaw in the system. It's the way it was designed to work. They're commercializing your attention. And so I don't care if they're trying to sell you this toaster or that toaster, but here I do start to care when we talk about civic integrity and democratic institutions and indeed human rights. And so, but the problem is that there's an individualized a graphic of you as a person, and they advertise to you based on a gigantic data set. So you're getting an individualized cocktail of information served to you right at the right time. And so all that to say, are there legal ways of doing it? Unfortunately, there's unsatisfactory ones until we go after the root, the central tumor on the democratic life, which is the business model of these companies. They call it surveillance capitalism or the economics of attention, but it's really two or three different things. It's the fact that platforms lock you in, so there is no data portability. You can't take your data from Facebook over to Twitter or X or whatever the people are calling it these days. You can't take your data from Google and give it to Apple, so they're not interoperable, and it's not portable. And so if we change that, then we have a chance. If the business model stays locked in, then expect all of this stuff to continue for the foreseeable future, and then just to get a whole lot worse, courtesy of generative AI.
Thank you very much. I know there are a few questions that we didn't get to, but we're running out of time, and I promised that we would close soon. So I'm just going to first thank all our speakers for being here. For the audience, I hope this is a useful platform. We will continue it and bring other experts to you, but we also ask you to stay engaged with these experts. Feel free to contact them. We will be sharing the presentations and the recording of this session with you after this after today. And I also want to thank all of you who have shared resources in the chat box. We also have colleagues that have shared information on UN resources and the work that's gone on by governments around the world to put together the Global Digital Compact. Osama and my colleague has shared the link. This is a really comprehensive framework. It's taken many years to bring different countries together to agree. And there, I think you will see a roadmap for where digital cooperation is moving and where are the potentials for closing the divide in this space. So it was launched in September 2024. It's a valuable resource, and I think it's a guiding instrument for all of us. So please do click the link, learn more on that resource from the United Nations, but also all the resources that you have seen today. I will give just last minute closing opportunity to our speakers. And thank all of you. We will be having the next sessions with other speakers, but maybe Ren, we start with you if you'd like to say anything in the closing.
Hi, Prancher. I'll do my best to cover just the very top most important point. I think this has covered quite a bit. ultimately comes down to building a lot of resiliency in terms of all the questions that's been asked about earning trust, about using AI in election, is that you need to first build resiliency in the public on how these technology work to understand its capabilities and limitation. I think we sound like we're doomsday sayer, but it's also because we look at the harms all the time. And so we know where the limits are. So essentially, I still understand that AI is still only just a machine. It is not going to help you make decisions. It simply infers on the data we provided. So if you're looking for something that's 100% accuracy, this is not your technology. So you need to really know where the limits lie on that. So that and resiliency. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I think this is key. It's just a machine. I mean, we are often seeing play out the fear that they're going to replace us as humans. So thank you for flagging that. I go to AJ.
I don't have very much to add. I mean, I think indeed it is just a machine, but I think what will be interesting is to see how we come to sort of engage and believe and maybe trust those machines, perhaps more than others. And as we see sort of how our relationship with the AI continues, it will sort of have quite important repercussions as to how we engage in our politics.
Thank you so much, Ingo, and then to Aaron last.
Yeah, just adding to it's just a machine. It also helps a lot if you just play with those tools. Like this is unique in the sense of like it's a rollout of a very impactful technology that's available to literally everybody, just downloading an app or downloading a model on your computer. But you can actually see what they can do. You don't have to just read hype infested coverage in the tech media. You can actually play with the tools, try to create misinformation yourself, try to make a deep fake. There's tons of tutorials. It's not really difficult, and that will give you a feeling of what's really feasible and what's possible and what's just breathless hype spread, for the sake of venture capital. So that's the best defense, really. Just, hands-on, go play with it. It's not that difficult. So I encourage everybody to do that.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think we have to get ourselves in the uncomfortable space of learning new things and unlearning what we know. So thanks, Ingo, for pushing us to do that. Aaron, over to you.
So there's an old saying that sunlight is the best disinfectant. So I'll make one comment that I think transcends both the AI and the political and the electoral integrity. So if you want to build and sustain public trust, that's the whole ball game. And so you can do that in a couple of different ways. Operate, like I said earlier, with transparency, but in procurement, in vote counting, in reporting, transparency, transparency, transparency. Regular public communications through trusted channels. Involve civil society and international observers whenever you can, because that'll increase your credibility. And then conduct post-election audits and publish the results in a way that's accessible. If you can do that, you're going to increase public trust and you're going to build and sustain that trust over the long term. So sunlight's the best disinfectant, and trust is one of the most important parts of democratic integrity.
Thank you. I think that's the most important closing here is to us, especially those of us who work on elections, the importance of credibility and trust of the process. We are very happy that you were all joined. We hope this was useful. I know for me individually, it was useful. And I know from the comments, this was a useful conversation, but it's really touching the surface of this topic and where we need to go as electoral practitioners and implementers. I want to also ask our participants and audience, if you have speakers you'd like and you think would be valuable for us as a community to hear from, please feel free to reach out to us to suggest names of speakers, including the speakers we have today. If you have suggestions for the future, we are out of time. Thank you again for being here. We look forward to seeing you in the next session.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. We usually unmute mics so people can say goodbye, but there's a lot of mics to unmute.
Thanks, Nigel.